Hey, Smoke Circle. You may have noticed a different title to your favorite stoned history podcast. If you're looking for hightailing through history and you didn't see it, don't worry, don't fret. Hightails of History is our new name. We're still the same show that you know and love, still the same sisters, still the same format. We just decided to change the name, make it make sense with what we're doing. It fits us a little bit better. So if that's what you were looking for, you found us. Don't worry. Come on in the Smoke Circle. We are ready to have you back to season 4. Welcome in. Hello and welcome to the season 4 opener of Hightails of History. It's a history podcast where two sisters get stoned and surprise each other with a story from history. Season 4, episode 1, welcome in. I'm Laurel, your older sister.
Joined by Katie, the younger sister.
Yeah, we're back. Dunk, dunk, dunk. That's it. That's all the song I can use.
As I was going to start singing, I was like, oh no, your copyright laws are a thing.
Yeah. Even then, hopefully no one sends a cease and desist letter. But we are back, baby. We are back for season 4. I'm so excited. Katie, how have you been? How are you? How was your break? How was your life? Lay it on me, sister. Figuratively.
Good, we're hanging in there, man. We're hanging in there. Not too much. Slayer's coming up. I don't know how much of it I'm going to see, but I'm going to be there with my little sleeping mask in case the lights get too much. It's photosensitivity, folks. But yeah, Slayer, man. That'll come out probably the first October episode we have will be when I'm back from Slayer.
I want to hear all about it then. Mark it.
Everyone is going to hear all about it.
Glad to have you back. Glad to be back. Glad we're all here together. And
how was your break? Restful?
No, but I mean, sorry, that was
not at all.
No, not at all. Very busy, but it's good. I had a wonderful little history adventure to Scotland. Yeah, I was there for like 5 business days, but it was a really great time.
5 business days.
It was just one thing after the other when I was there, but saw Stirling Castle, toured Stirling Castle, saw Edinburgh Castle, which is just probably one of the most beautiful little castles up on a mountain. Gorgeous city, Edinburgh is. Oh my goodness. I want to be there forever. In my heart. It's just set me back down there again. It was an amazing city. The people were amazing. It just felt really great.
I've heard they're very, very friendly.
Oh yeah. Everyone was so friendly and felt really safe. And, it was just, I can't say enough good things about that city. And then also, I went up to Stirling and went up to Loch Ness.
Yeah.
Had some fun with Nessie.
So how big is that lake?
Okay, so I know that geography is not every American's strong suit, but I have a pretty good idea about it in general. And I don't think I ever had seen what Loch Ness looks like.
It's
on
long,
a map. And it's really long, and it's almost like you see rivers kind of represented as like a blue line on a map. You have like a river on each end of it, and then you get the lake that just gets a little bit wider than the river. So it almost like blends into the river if you look at it on a map because it's just widens just a little bit, and that's the loch, and then it goes very, very deep.
I heard it's deep. Like insanely deep,
very deep, but very very narrow. So you can easily see from one side to the other, and there's a lovely castle on there.
Ooh.
And some ruins, castle ruins. Urquhart? That's what it looks like, Urquhart. I don't know if that's actually how it's pronounced.
It's probably Gaelic, which usually is not pronounced how it looks.
Nope. I'm just pulling that out my back pocket, trying to remember the name of it. I'll put a picture up here for everybody who's watching so you can see the castle and the lake. So much fun. And got to meet some friends of the show as well, which was awesome. I got to meet Dr. Darren Reed, got to meet Dr. Alice, who's on Fetch the Smelling Salts. She's going to be, I'm saying, girl, you're on the show sometime. She's so much fun. I got to be on the show with her and Dr. Kim. They're an absolute blast. And so it was nice. Like, it's like you get to meet people and they're like, wow, you're a real person. This is so great. And having such a great time. Thank you, Scotland, people of Scotland, Edinburgh. Wonderful. But it was so fast. I feel like I didn't really get to enjoy
do a whole
as much
lot.
as I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like I was always doing a lot, but like I want to be able to spend some time there. So, Katie, that means we're just going to go back. just
That sounds
just
good to me.
Group trip. Let's go. But thank you. Yeah, thank you for asking, Katie. It was a grand time. Let's get into the show here. Katie, what are you partaking in today? What's your food choice?
Half of a snozberry.
Does it taste like snozberries?
No, it tastes like footy weed, but
the snozberries taste like snozberries.
I think it's actually might be pronounced snoozier berry. I'm not sure, but I call it a snoz.
Are they for sleeping?
Oh, they might be. That might be why there's a moon on it.
She just passes out.
I take them for their they've got all those.
Probably
what am I
CBD.
trying to say to you? Yeah, but they have more. They've got CBN, CBD, CBG. OCD. I mean, I don't know. They've got everything. Like, I was like, all right, well, there's a lot of acronyms on this one, so sounds good.
Yeah. Wow. I just kind of finished out what was left because I was running late, of course, and I had just a tiny bit left in my pipe of some. It's it's a goofy name, as they all are. Something like party punch gelato or something like that. It's a gelato strain, which are my favorites usually. Different various kinds. But I think
I
there's
like the gelato variety.
Anyway, so there's that, and then I have a little bit of Miracle Alien cookies in my.
There it is. I was like, I know there's an alien cookie as well. So
my Mac one, there it is. Quite a fan of that one as well too. Mac and gelato, and any of those sort of variations are my favorites. So there I am, and here I am. Oh, I also have coffee because to like.
That's what I should have done. That's where I'm going after this is to get some uppers.
As you've taken your snoozeberry gummy. Or is it snozberry? Yeah, you ready to high noon duel?
Cue the tumbleweed.
That was visual for everybody. There we go. All right. Bottle, leaf, grinder, shoot.
Oh, get out of it.
You did it. You beat me. Katie leafed, I bottled. Katie's going first.
Oh, gosh. Our story takes us back to a time of wizards, dragons, knights in shining armor. A time when magic was real and legends were made. Could you tell I wrote this while I was, The year is 2019. Pause for laughter.
Wrote in pause for laughter.
I totally did. In parentheses.
I hope you guys are all laughing because we're.
I hope so too. Oh yeah.
Okay.
So the year is 2019, and deep at the bottom of a river in Bosnia, there was discovered a 1.5-hand sword that was driven into a solid rock 36 feet below the surface of obviously of the river. And it was just there for freaking a long time, believe me. It's more years than my fingers can count.
Yeah, because there's only 10.
I could even get my toes involved and it still wouldn't be enough digits. So the sword is a medieval 1.5-hand sword that inexplicably, good one, Katie, inexplicably, was discovered half covered in solid stone in the river of Vrbas in Bosnia, close to this town that I looked up the pronunciation of. Couldn't hear one, so I had to sound it out and hope that that's right. Zevaj? It's one of those. It's in Bosnia.
Okay.
And Google gave me a really non-committal sounding out of it. So I was like, thanks for no help at all.
So it's like its own question in there. And it's like, I'm Google, and I don't even know.
I don't know. And I was like, why don't you know that? You have like worldwide power. Like, get useful. Why don't you Google? It took time to even get the sword removed, obviously, as they had to remove it like piece by piece, like, because it's underwater, so probably rusted. You just rip that sucker out and you're going to damage everything. So, plus also, I would think you'd want to understand why it got stuck in rock. That's kind of a wild one to me. Like, I was like, I don't know how a whole sword ends up in a rock unless it's just sediment over time. So.
Yeah, maybe. I mean.
Right?
Here I am pretending to be like a geologist.
I think sounds good. That sounds valid, man. You know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure that's how science works. Yeah.
Earth science. I didn't take it. I was busy suffering in honors chemistry and honors physics the same year and wished, just for school to disappear.
My earth science class, we watched natural disaster movies.
So like Twister?
Frequently. Twister, Volcano, The Abyss.
What?
Yeah, I know. Dante's Peak, I think, even like these aren't even like legit. It's like watching Marie Antoinette in your history class, the one, like with the one with Kirsten Dunst and stuff. And then like your teacher be like, yep, that's part of our unit on the French Revolution. And you're like, what?
I'm not sure that that's like valid, but who am I to tell you how to do your job?
And they're regular movies, so they would take like 2 days or like two or three class periods to get through. I was like, this is the best class ever.
I didn't have fun science. I had suffering science. So obviously they had to remove the sword slowly, piece by piece, as destroying the sword that had been underwater for who knows how long. The sword was recovered with part of the rock still attached. So they didn't get all of it off. So
test that shit.
Honestly, yeah. So to find a sword intact within the Balkan region is exceptional, to be completely honest with you. It just doesn't happen. So this was like a giant freaking deal. Like everybody was so excited. Yeah. Cool. A medieval sword hasn't even been found in the Balkan region in 90 years. So,
wow.
Yeah, big deal. So they are making the conservation of this particular blade obviously a priority because they have one.
That's amazing.
I know. Isn't that wild?
How infrequent that is.
I know. And well, every 100 years almost, pretty much. Like, that's a long time. So a lot of them must have been destroyed or... Man, that's the tricky thing with Europe is... a lot of history happened there, and a lot of it's on top of other history, and it's really hard to trace things back because as modern things came in, industrialization and stuff like that happened, like a lot of stuff was tossed out, lost, has shit built on top of it, or was taken to another country in general where it didn't originally reside. So
yeah,
good luck.
Wars and stuff yeah,
and especially like with the world wars.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're also then trying to like eradicate the history of a people too, when you're trying to like, over time as people are conquering, they're trying to erase the people before them, and
so not a lot survives.
Yeah,
and a lot of stuff gets lost over time. So to find stuff like this is like really, really nerdy and cool.
Yes, love it.
Janko, I don't speak Bosnian, so I'm doing. Huh?
Oh.
No, his name is Janko Verser. He's a historian of the Republika Srpska Museum. It's the main museum. Love you. That was amazing. Don't feel ashamed. That was actually fucking funny.
I'm so sorry for that, man. Sorry, Janko.
That's okay. You didn't know the next word.
I could have kept my mouth shut. At least heard what the... I was like, Janko cheese.
Just gonna put this out here. Mr. Museum Curator guy. Oh, he's a historian. I know one of those. Okay. Now is your chance to definitely wear Janko jeans when you go to work because it's absolutely appropriate and the 90s are in fashion again. I don't care how much of a historian you are. You guys can dress how you want because that doesn't change the knowledge in your head. So there's
That's right. Also,
just putting that out
wear
there.
That history, baby. It's now vintage. The 90s.
Yeah. So anyway, back to Mr. Janko, who needs to make style choices for all of us. He said that the sword was the type used from the end of around the 13th era to the first half of the 15th century. So there's about a 100-year span there.
Okay.
Ish, that it could have been. That's based upon their analysis of the blade right now. I don't have a whole lot more on it, is the sad thing, because they're doing a lot of that right now as we speak, because they found this at the very end of 2019, and I don't know, because COVID shut the world down, how much was able to be done, so they're still looking into this. So if anyone wants to know more about it, like, this is a current ongoing story right now, so it's current history. And I just thought it was really cool, and I've had it written down for a while, and I wanted to make sure I did it. So the sword itself is a fairly well-preserved specimen. It's relatively rare in that region, as I said before, which is why it is a priority for the city of Banja Luka, I believe, is where the museum that it's in right now. If you Google it, it's going to give you all these names, and then you can put it into the Google Flights. Not flights, Google search.
Translate?
Yeah.
Or not translate.
No,
Yeah.
I just meant like
Search.
Google search so that you can find it. But if you want to take a flight there, don't let me stop you. So the sword itself was discovered near the ruins of a medieval castle by the city of, just forgive me, Bosnia, I am doing my best. Zavash? Zevik? I think it's Zavash because that's what it looked like on, you know how it like sounds it out and gives you weird alien symbols that's supposed to mean something to you?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
all I got on this. So
Okay.
there's that. It was once the seat of Bosnian rulers. So back in these old centuries, it was a big deal in the area where it was, so I guess it makes sense to have found it. In the early days, that medieval village of Zevaj had its own nobility and was built around a now ruined castle located on the left bank of the Merznica River in the modern county of Karlovac. So after a long and turbulent history, the castle was unfortunately destroyed in 1777. Oh, that's right after America, because weren't we 1776? Sorry, I just thought, I was like, wait a second.
That's the spirit. Yeah. I got to sneak in my Three Stooges joke again.
It's fair. That's fair. I'm working with half a deck right now. So the castle was destroyed the year after America became a country in 1777. And today a private house sits on the ruins of the castle with the walls still remaining of one tower. So historians are still trying to determine how it became embedded into the rock and why. The only answer I could come up with, and my learned colleague, because we're both the, science rockets over here, was the deposits building up around it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay.
Let's see what they find out. I'm going to try and keep tabs on this and update people as I find out more, but I think it's going to be a while. So hopefully they're on it in that museum. The sword found in the stone in a river in Bosnia has inevitably drawn comparisons to the famous Excalibur, the sword in the legend of King Arthur. Excalibur is the sword of King Arthur and Sir Thomas Malory's iconic work, Le Morte d'Arthur, published in 1485, which was before that sword was even in. Think about that, wild, because it was between the end of the 13th, beginning of the 15th century is when they had dated it so far on analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So this story was written, it was right at the same time. I'm a dumbass.
That makes it cooler, actually.
It does make it cooler. So published 1485, the sword was originally introduced in Joffrey, spelled the Game of Thrones way, of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain in 1136 CE, which that was before the sword was even there. It was as the Caliburn is who they listed as in that Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. They further developed later by writers before Malory took the idea and immortalized it in his work with King Arthur. But they had mentioned an Excalibur-like sword before in previous literature. If that makes sense. Hopefully I didn't confuse you explaining that badly.
Yeah.
As with any other magical or powerful swords in legend, it is identified with a single hero, of course, and not allowed to fall into the hands of the enemy owing to its inherent power. Can't happen. In the case of Excalibur, when Arthur is dying of his wounds following his battle with Mordred, it must be returned to its source, the Lady of the Lake, rather than being entrusted to whichever knight, no matter how noble, might succeed Arthur as king. So there's the story of Excalibur and King Arthur, and also the little Bosnian Excalibur that we have. So I'll do my best to keep tabs on that and update everybody as we find it out. But I've had that story written down for a while.
Welcome back to a new season. We're happy to be back. We're happy to have you back. And we hope that you've been enjoying yourself in the Smoke Circle so far. If so, please make sure you're subscribed or following on the platform you're listening on. And while you're there subbing, please rate and review, as that is the best way you can support our show for free. Doing so helps us move up into the charts and get seen by more history lovers. If you want to support us and get access to more content like bonus episodes, history cooking videos, and historical movie nights with us, head on over to Patreon and join the Best Buds Club. You can even join our Patreon at a free level. In fact, as a special thank you to all of our buds, this episode was released 2 days early, so all of our members, free or not, got 2-day early access. At the paid tiers, you'll get all of our regular episodes 2 days early as one of your many perks. We're going to get back to the show now, but all of our social media profiles and our Patreon are linked in the show notes of the episode, so make sure that you're following. And with that, let's puff pass it to part 2.
Friends, there are moments in history when a scientist or inventor's idea will become such a disruption in the status quo that there is a need to silence them. Lightning flash. For example, the poster child of all that sort of stuff is Galileo Galilei, who's the famous Italian astronomer, who, amongst his many theories and amazing contributions to science and mathematics, was a vocal supporter of the Copernican heliocentric system in which the Earth revolves around the sun. Catholic Church was not about that. He was about it. Catholic Church was not about that, and there was a Roman Inquisition processed against him, and he was forced to recant his views and spend his remaining years in house arrest, and it's terrible. And there's other scientists and philosophers who had similar ideas about the cosmos, which got them killed. One of them was Galileo's contemporary Giordano Bruno, who had similar views about the universe, the heliocentric universe, and was burned at the stake. Yeah, the church didn't like when people had non-church views about the world around them, you know? And then when you go into like inventions and things like that, inventions that are going to disrupt industry, or like maybe the status quo in industry, I should say, there's stuff like that where things just get a little dicey, get a little weird. And that's kind of the theme for my history today. So today's slice of history is some mystery history about the life and the mysterious death of the inventor of the diesel engine, Rudolf Diesel.
Yo, listen, you're bringing car history. As soon as you said that, I was like, I know what she's talking about.
While crossing the English Channel by ferry in September of 1913, Diesel went missing, and his body was found about 2 weeks later in the water by a Dutch ship. Although it was ruled a suicide, speculation about his mysterious death fueled rumors that put some of the most powerful men in the world as the culprit for his murder. John D. Rockefeller, an owner of Standard Oil, and German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II.
So as I'm like sitting, I'm like way more into this than I should be. You're getting edible Katie, but also like car loving Katie.
Yeah, this will be fun. Let's all get into our smoky-filled mystery machine, kids. Shaggy is moving over. He's, puff, pass. Here we go. I'm going to go through his biography and then talk about his mysterious death and then like the theories that surround it. My main source was the 2023 book, The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel by Douglas Brunt. And then also I supplemented with a few articles from the BBC, Time Magazine, and then an article that was debunks one of the theories around his death, which was written by Ronnie Schreiber for Haggerty Media, who seems to be like a automotive historian and journalist. Rudolf Diesel was born March 18th, 1858 in Paris, France, to German-born parents, specifically Bavarian-born because it wasn't Germany exactly at this point, but German-born parents, Theodore.
Bavaria strong, Bayern, Mia San Mia, and Augsburg. Both Bavarian teams. In case you wondered.
We're going to be hanging out in Augsburg quite a bit, actually.
Girl, fire away.
Yeah, Daddy Theodore is from Augsburg in that area. He was a craftsman, so he was a leather worker. He mostly did bindings on books and stuff, but he did children's toys and gun holsters and like silk-lined purses and stuff like that.
That's
Elise,
rad.
she worked as a music teacher and a governess when she met Theodore, and the couple had 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy, Rudolph. And Rudolph is different not only from his other sisters, but his peers and boys his age. He's shy. He's a little introverted. He wasn't a roughhousing play kid. When all the kids would start playing and like running around, he would go to the corner and he would play with toys and take them apart and see how they worked and draw pictures of machines and different mechanical things that he would have in his head. He was very analytical, which vexed old Daddy Diesel, because while Elise gave comfort and love and a love of music and art to her children, Theodore was he was a bully, really. Quite frankly, he was a real bully, particularly to Rudolf. The book doesn't say much on how he was with the girls, but yeah, he was not nice to Rudolf, because being analytical and like too smart would mean that Rudolf might not want to stay home and work his father's business like his father and his father before him. And that just won't do. But the Diesels lived in Paris. I mean, this is the city of lights, literally and figuratively. The lamps that lit the city were the result of social progress and science, allowing for its citizens to stay outside and be social for longer and increasing the safety of the city. But I also would say like a city of lights for enlightenment, light bulb moments. There's a lot of great ideas and scientific innovation. And it was just this starburst of art and culture. So Rudolf lives his first 12 years in the city, which was freshly renovated by its new emperor, Napoleon III, who commissioned well-made streets. Remember how I said at the end of the last episode, like Paris was the one that had lights and like the nice streets and everything? They're kind of freshly renovated by Napoleon III. They had this infrastructure that they started putting in place. Immaculate government buildings, like the architecture of the government buildings was beautified, as well as the parks having sewers and like drainage systems and stuff like that. So like Paris had it going on.
What's really funny is that's actually kind of how I felt about it when I was there too. It was like the cleaner, nicer city. Everything felt brighter is the stupidest way to describe it, but it did. But also it's sunnier in France than it is in England, so that could just be me being unfair.
During the Enlightenment was the first industrial revolution, which brought forth a mechanization of industry and irrevocably changes society. The Enlightenment ends around the turn of the 19th century, and then the Industrial Revolution formally ends in the middle of the 1800s. So like the Industrial Revolution kind of goes a little longer, cuts off. And this is all about the time of Rudolph's birth. And this all culminates in the World's Fair. The first modern one was held in London in 1851. The second time it was held in Paris. And little Rudolph, who is born at the end of this industrial age and enlightened, well, it's a little bit later than this enlightened age, there's all kinds of new stuff going on. And he's in the city where a lot of this new stuff is happening, and it's Paris. And he goes to this World's Fair in 1867. And between me, you, and all of our friends here, it was like this who's who of big 19th century names. So we got like Russian czars and German Kaisers, and like the promotional material was written by two famous members of the Club des Hachishans, the Hashish Club, Victor Hugo and Alexander Dumas. So we have our fellow greenery lovers there.
Always represented.
Victor Hugo and Alexander Dumas. Jules Verne was inspired to write his great classic 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from seeing exhibitions on electricity. So there's a lot of, like, this was a big exhibition. And for our little 9-year-old Rudolf Diesel, it was heaven. He heard a beautiful Steinway piano for the first time from America. He marveled at these giant cannons, and then he would sketch them. The most exciting thing of all for Diesel and the other fairgoers was the unveiling of the coal gas engine, which ended up winning the exhibition's grand prize. Now, steam engines, here we go. This is where we're going to get into like the science and why this is such a big deal and why he's such a big deal to history. Steam engines already exist at this point in time, of course, right? So we've got like trains and steam-powered machinery, but the coal gas engine, and I am not an engineer and I don't know how cars work. So maybe as I talk about this, Katie, if you have anything to add in, that's fine.
I'll do my best.
It's not like we have to know all the parts of an engine, obviously, but the coal gas engine was an internal combustion engine,
Okay.
much smaller than a steam engine, more
Yeah.
fuel efficient, and was safer than steam engines. And in this mechanized industrial age, nothing happens without an engine now. And
Mhm.
Rudolf was fascinated. And he goes home and he sketches this engine and he's like, this is a thing of beauty. I love it.
So all they're using is like the engines that they're running like trains with right now. That's all they had up until this coal powered one. So that's the first internal combustion engine ever?
I think so.
That's insane.
Mhm.
That basically is the entire blueprint for every engine now ever. Just to give you an idea of what that is it literally went from like just building up enough steam power to push something to an entire internal combustion like chambers, and like you control the fuel to air ratio, which controls the type of combustion you have and everything. That's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Like a big deal.
And if it's not the first internal combustion engine, because I didn't make a note on whether it was or wasn't.
Okay.
If it's not, it's one of the first ones, and it's certainly
Okay.
the first coal gas powered one, creating a more efficient engine overall.
Yeah, definitely, because they're containing the combustion. I mean, literally, that's all it is just, but doing it goodly.
Do all the stuff good. Before long, however, when Rudolf is 12, tensions between France and Germany are high. And now at this time, it is still Prussia, but it's very soon going to become what we call Germany today. So I'm just going to say Germany at the moment here. How high are these tensions, Laurel? Oh, well, I'd say they're as high as Katie and I, but not as
Close.
peaceful.
Yeah, nowhere near as close as peaceful.
No, it's war, and it's the Franco-Prussian War. Basically, France is just over it with any sort of German citizen, Prussian-born citizen, such as the Diesel family. And all German-born citizens of France are booted out and deported to England with whatever few belongings they could grab.
I thought they were Bavarian.
They are Bavarian, but
Okay.
It's still
They don't
Prussia.
care because
It's
okay.
still of that
Oh,
German.
Bavaria was part of Prussia. I didn't realize that. Okay. You learn something new every day on this podcast.
There
Let me
we
tell
go.
you, even if you're helping with it.
We're all about the continuation of learning. Now, most biographies you're going to read on the internet sort of gloss over this next part of Rudolph's life because, like, for the sake of time, it's not really maybe the most interesting or pertinent for short articles. But my history-loving friends, you're going to like this, I hope. His landing in London with his family in 1870 makes for this really interesting catalyst in said biography, because it's when he goes from Paris, a city that was a vibrant place and, arts and ingenuity, and unfortunately they've been booted from there. But now that his family has been like dumped in London, a foreign city for one, with like little more than the clothes on their backs, 2, and 3, a city that is the epitome of industry. It's like whenever you think of like old industrial revolution city, I always think of London. I don't know about you, of course, but
Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's it right there. You're right. You're in the heart of it. The Great Mouse Detective. Excellent.
Yeah, obviously.
If you haven't watched it, it's fantastic.
They are taken from the arts and ingenuity city, dumped into London, which is like the industry city. And we are at the point in London where it is the most Dickensian, Oliver Twist, Artful Dodger, late 19th century you can imagine. We're in that London. Smog, the fucking smog and the soot everywhere. It smells. The people are poor. We are post gin craze in terms of like the episodes, right? So if you've been listening, we are post gin craze and now like pre Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
That's
close.
That London,
you're close,
right?
Though. He's right around the corner.
He's right around the corner. And on top of that, refugees are like streaming into the city now from France and from any other country, I suppose, too, but like from France. And now everyone's now competing for food and for shelter and for jobs and trying to like just figure out their lives.
Yeah.
And it's there that Rudolf witnessed the disparity between the classes, particularly how bad things were for the working class. He sees the industry barons crushing boot, on the workers that they frequently exploited, as well as how the industry on a bigger scale, we're looking at the economics of it all, like how the industry is drawing people out of the towns and the villages and centralizing people in these big, dirty cities. And everything's dirty. There's horse shit everywhere and lots of disease too. And how that is also like squashing the artisan class. So I like to think of it like Amazon to independent bookstores or like Etsy stores, people who are creating and like making things, this artisan class, sort of middle class. And it was just making the classes further and further apart. Thankfully for Rudolf and his big thinking brain, though, it's not there for very long, which is why I think people gloss over it in his biography. His father's relatives back in Augsburg, Germany, recognized Rudolf's gifted, albeit untrained, intelligence and invited him to come live with them in Augsburg and continue his schooling. Yeah. There he got the highest grades in the history of his school at Munich's Tensionhausen Schule. Shit. I listened to it a bunch of times and now I can't like Technische Schule.
Technische Schule? That would be it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep. In Munich. Nailed it.
München. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
München, yeah. And getting a scholarship into the Royal Bavarian Polytechnic of Munich. He also becomes a German citizen at that time. During his time at university, he proved himself brilliant in engineering. His thermodynamics lecturer was the refrigeration pioneer Carl von Linde, of whom he later became a protege. So like, because he's living in this like post-industrial age, his professors, like his lecturers, his contemporaries and his mentors, this world of people that he's around now and forward are all
inventors and like people we would read about.
Yeah, like the reason we have refrigeration came from Carl von Linde. Tesla and Edison. I mean, you don't have to like these guys, but Ford, Edison, Marconi, all these people that were these great inventors and scientists are all like his people around him. Rudolf's scholastic interest was in thermodynamics, particularly the relationship between heat and mechanical energy and the work of Nicolas Carnot. He was in a lecture with Carl von Linde, who was speaking on the mathematical equations that would make the ideal Carnot cycle. Now, at this time, the ideal cycle had not been fully realized. Due to the need to heat water and creating steam first to even begin a process, it's a more complex process for these steam engines. And then, even then, the best steam engines only used about 6 to 10% of that ideal efficiency cycle.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not a lot. That's why when you said from the steam engine to the combustion, I was like, the efficiency is insanely different just because you just lose so much steam, you just can't contain it. So it's very hard to get enough to even make a difference and then utilize that.
But really what the world knows right now is steam, so if you're going to introduce anything on top of that, it's like, wait, what? There's a future? There's something that we can do more?
It's like a metalhead finding double bass for the first time. That's an option?
You can do two?
You're like, wait, there's more than one? Yeah. Well, that's a moment none of us will ever forget.
And so if that's what you're used to and you find out that is only 6 to 10% efficient, and you're like, we could have what? More power? That's what happened to Rudolf while he's sitting in this lecture. He like leans forward and he's like, what? And he writes down in the margin of his notebook, which you can now see in the museum in maybe Berlin or Munich. It says, can one build steam engines which realize the perfect cycle process without being very complicated? And this note that he makes in his notebook is his Polaris. It's his guiding question, his North Star that ruled all of his work going forward. So remember that coal gas engine that won the grand prize in the 1867 Paris World's Fair that Rudolf saw?
Sure do. Like, the combustion engine?
Yeah. He's like, wow, this is amazing.
Internal combustion engine?
Though more compact and more efficient, worked on a small scale and only could power maybe a few horsepower. And on top of that, it only increased the efficiency on the Carnot cycle up to 12 to 14%. So everyone's hyped about this engine, but it only increases it maybe like 2 to 10% more.
Yeah.
Depending. Now, something I feel that's worth noting is that Western Europe doesn't have oil like other places in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're looking at an energy efficient engine with oil, it's extremely important. because inefficiency means importing more oil, which is not only expensive, but it means that there's now a dependence on foreign oil. And also means that all these engines that are meant to help people and improve their work and productivity and whatever it may be don't work. So then it's not actually helping, so it's a real catch-22. Rudolf Diesel graduated the university in 1880 with, once again, the highest grades in the history of the school. Yeah. His former professor, Karl von Linn, took him on as an apprentice and set him up in his new plant, which was opening in Paris. So he goes back to Paris. He's already a fluent French speaker.
As we all do, she pulls us back in.
She brings us back. Over the next decade, Diesel worked as a manager for the Paris plant and then moved back to Berlin in 1890 to manage the company's technical offices. So the first decade of his working life, he's managing and working in these different Diesel plants and as a higher up. He's making money. It's great. But management wasn't really where his heart was. And with that question written in the side of his notebook, it's burning. Can one build steam engines which realize the perfect cycle process without being very complicated? So he began working on that in his free time, creating an efficient thermal engine that he received a patent for in 1892. Now, in case any of you want to know how a diesel engine works, I'm going to just describe it really quick from Lemelson, MIT. Let's get MIT on the line. They're gonna know how to explain this stuff to me.
They're gonna help Laurel help you.
So this is a direct quote. The diesel engine does not require an externally applied ignition to the mixture of air and fuel inside. Rather, this is accomplished through compressing the air inside the cylinder and heating it so that the fuel, which would be brought into contact with the air just before the end of the compression period, would ignite on its own. As a result, the diesel engine would be smaller and lighter than the traditional engine used in most road vehicles and would not require the use of an additional fuel source for the ignition. Overall, the fumes, as I understand this, the fumes off this engine are non-existent or, are very, very
They're
low.
a lot less.
Well, this is I know, because I was just thinking, I kept thinking of diesel fuel in the diesel engine, but I didn't realize that with the diesel engine, and I'll talk more about this too, but it could use any sort of fuel source. Peanut oil, vegetable oils, different kerosene and crude oils.
Diesel engines of today, no, because they're so specialized down for that. But yes, what you're talking about, they had the capability. Diesel's fascinating. That's why, really because amazing. It's compression based, like what you were talking about, that's why diesels can't start when they're cold. Because they can't get the compression, because all your molecules are huddling together. That's why, if anyone was wondering, if you didn't know that, that's why you got to warm them up so that they'll start.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they don't get a light like our petrol gasoline does.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the earlier diesel engines, but over the next 5 years, he just works this design so that it wasn't just a great design on paper, but could feasibly be a real working machine. Some early tests, they didn't go so great. He himself was nearly killed when an engine exploded in a bad test, but they did have a successful test in 1897. But not everybody is happy about this. There were some who published these scathing reviews and papers about the diesel engine, saying everything from the engine is far too fantastical to actually work. There's no way something this grand could actually be a working machine. And then there's others that were saying, well, you've not done anything original. There are other scientists who are in the process of creating similar engines, and this is not original work. And then people were just plain old mad at the disruption that the diesel engine would bring to industry, because disrupt it did. Only a year after its successful test in 1897, the diesel engine made its namesake a whole lot of money. Rudolf Diesel was a very rich man indeed. The engine was immediately used to power trains, boats, motor vehicles like early cars and trucks and stuff like that in these early
Tractors.
days.
So it made farming easier.
Yeah. As well as bring power to electric and water plants, pipelines, operations for mining, oil fields, factories, all of it. So here's the fun part. I think it's fun, at least, because I love some big stat changes. You want to take a guess at what the diesel engine's theoretical efficiency was at this time? Just to recap, The best steam engines were about 6 to 10%. The coal gas engine from Nicholas Auto was 12 to 14%.
What I think it was projected to be or what it actually was?
It's theoretical efficiency, like what kind of tests they were generally getting on it.
Oh, 63%.
Very close, 75. Yes. It was a game changer. Holy
Massive.
shit.
That's an entire world changer right there.
Yeah, exactly. That's an understatement right there. I mean, we're talking just ships alone. I like to think of the Titanic. You know, in the movie The Titanic, the author gives the Titanic example too. But you say like when he's like, "Let's stretch your legs" or something, and then it kind of he goes full steam ahead, and it kind of goes down through the processes of what's happening in the steam room, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're not like ship savvy like myself, you probably have the basics of the general idea of what's happening. So you can use that movie if you'd like, or think of like a steam train. The engine needs coal, right? So ships have huge steam powered engines, right? Yeah. So they're already huge. It requires lots and lots of space and also lots and lots of coal to fuel them. Lots of coal means lots of workers to shovel the coal in. Lots of workers
and more weight.
Means extra space on the ship needed to house them, extra food, extra weight. And on top of that, it then needs to load up on coal frequently. So it's making lots of stops in order to take on more coal, uses up lots of fossil fuels because of all the coal that it needs. And so it just takes longer. There's just general inefficiency all around for it. Diesel engines, on the other hand, not only are smaller and take up less space to begin with, but could circumnavigate the globe and make a trip around the world without having to stop for fuel.
Wow. What a difference.
Right? And then also thinking too, and this will be something to keep in your back pocket, is that because the diesel engine does not create steam, you don't get the poof, 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 poof on the horizon. So ships are not, if you're talking about war times at least, they're not giving away their position on the water. So there you go. Just put that in your back pocket there. The more efficient and therefore less expensive diesel engines' vast use across many different kinds of industry and machinery meant that it had a major impact on the second industrial revolution, which is now happening around this time, turn of the 20th century. And you know who doesn't like having disruption in the second industrial revolution and having their monopolies and their lucrative hold threatened?
Anybody that had a monopoly previous to 1892?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Yeah. Particularly coal, oil, governments who realize that their steam-powered warfare is now outdated because of the poof, poof, poof and all that sort of stuff. And on top of that, any government that managed to get some sort of exclusivity with the diesel engine meant bad news for any of her enemies.
Yep.
Since the engine hit the scene, Diesel's family grew to include grandchildren, and his engine had been selling like hotcakes. He was buds with other inventors and businessmen, and was in talks to have contracts with various businesses and governments for specific uses of his engine. So these are all things that are going on in the background for about 15 years, 1898 to 1913. By 1912, there were more than 70,000 diesel engines working around the world, mostly in factories and generators, and it was poised to take America's railroads by storm and completely revolutionize the American rail system and the transport of people and cargo. We're like right on that cusp. September 29th, 1913. Rudolf Diesel boards the SS Dresden, an overnight ferry from Belgium across the English Channel to London, right? Where like the English Channel becomes the North Sea, basically. After dinner with two of his friends and business companions who were on the trip with him to go to London, he requested a 6:15 a.m. wake-up call, retired to his cabin by 10, told his friends, looking forward to see you in the morning, laid out his bedclothes. He never changed into them. His hat and coat were found neatly laid on the ship's promenade deck, but Rudolf Diesel was nowhere to be found. Almost immediately, once the news actually came out and happened, newspapers took it, ran with it around the world. They were announcing the inventor's mysterious disappearance from the Dresden. His two friends who were on board with him were only able to account for Rudolf announcing his departure for bed and that his room was orderly and neat the next morning when they realized he didn't show up to breakfast. They hadn't seen him during that period. And when they were in his room, they also noticed that his landing ticket, so like the ticket that you used to get like back off the boat again, was still there. So they felt certain that he never got off the boat, at least not when he was supposed to, right? The only thing besides the coat and the hat that was found odd, that one up on the promenade deck by the railing. And another odd thing in his room was in his notebook next to the date September 29th, there's a little tiny cross penciled in. News headlines started getting more intriguing, if you will, as the days went on. So, for example, here is the timeline series of headlines from the New York Times regarding this. Dr. Diesel vanishes from steamship, October 1st. Then, October 2nd, no ray of light on Diesel mystery. German inventor was a millionaire and his home was happy. October 13th, Diesel family in straits. Missing inventor said to have left them in extreme need. And then on October 15th, Diesel was bankrupt. He owed $375,000. Tangible assets only about $10,000. Even more strange but less credible is this headline the following spring. Reports Dr. Diesel living in Canada. Munich journal hears inventor supposedly drowned has begun life anew. So that was like this one random story that came out the following spring. So take another little puff, my friends. We are going to hop into the mysterious death of Rudolf Diesel. In the days leading up to his disappearance, he had what people could probably look back and point out as strange or uncharacteristic behavior for him. In the time leading up to his departure to England, Rudolf and his wife, Marta, had been traveling around and visiting friends and family, just having fun together. And at some point, it was decided that Marta was no longer going to go with Rudolf to England on this business trip to maybe talk patents with different businesses over there. So Marta and Rudolf, they go their separate ways. She had a little more traveling to do. He was going to go off and get ready for his trip. He goes home. He gives the staff a week off and invites his oldest son, Rudolf Jr., to come visit. Now, during Jr.'s visit, Rudolf Sr. gave him this large ring of keys and took him around the house and showed him how to unlock everything, like what key went to what, showed him where important things were, important papers and documentation. And during this time, the book I read mentioned, this is so strange because there doesn't seem to be a lot of context around it, but it's remarked that they had a conversation together. And Rudolf Jr., something about passing through an area where Ludwig II of Bavaria, he was the last Bavarian king about 25 years prior, who died, probably, also mysterious death, probably by drowning. And it's remarked that Junior says something about the best or easiest way to die would be to jump from a quickly moving ship. It's a strange thing to say, right? And it's weird. Yeah, it's just kind of
it's fucking weird, yeah. If I was I'm going on an Alaskan cruise, I've always wanted to go on, I'd be like, do you know one of the most efficient ways to die is to jump from a moving ship? I'd be like, why would you fucking say that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after this visit between father and son, Rudolf Sr. burns a bunch of papers and took the most important documents that pertained to the creation of his engine to a museum and donated them. Again, either Berlin or Munich. He gave Marta this travel case. He bought this really beautiful overnight bag, and he wraps it up and he gives it to her and he says, please don't open it until a week after I leave. This is a present for you. And she's like, all right, great. Got it. He also gifted Marta and his son, his second son, his middle son, a copy of his recently published book that he wrote about the diesel engine and its processes and creation and whatnot. It was just a little, here's a book about my engine. The inscriptions on each people have read into a little bit because they're interesting. To his son, it was essentially this book is the skeleton of my work, but I would love for you to flesh it out and really build upon it because I feel like it has farther to go. It's not complete yet.
Was his son mechanically inclined like he is?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay,
yeah.
I was going to say, I was like, I hope that, because Tolkien has a son that is an author like he is, in his own right, he is an author. Not everybody gets lucky to have a kid that can do the same thing you did and just as well.
So yeah, he wants his son to continue the work, and which, I think is kind of a normal inscription to leave in a book to your son. But to Marta, more ominously, says, my wife, you were everything to me in this world. For you alone have I lived and struggled. If you leave me, then I want to be no more. Your man. He penned a few more letters to Marta from port before boarding the Dresden. And they basically bookend the first and the last, essentially telling her about his upcoming trip, who he was meeting. He was looking forward to it, and telling her that he telegraphed ahead to his favorite hotel. So, she can send word to him there and they'll talk back and forth. Bookending it with like practical information, right? His second letter was much more like romantic and tender. It says, here you go, you ready? Do you feel how I love you? I would think that even from a great distance, you must feel it as a gentle quivering in you. Quiver. Ooh, I don't know if I like that, the love letter. Anyway, moving on. As the receiver of a wireless telegraph machine. What a hot, sexy engineer he is. He's like, I'm going to compare this quivering love that you must feel as if you're a wireless telegraph machine. But hey, maybe Mrs. Diesel was into it. Marta might have been like, yeah, I'm quivering. You know
Who
it.
doesn't love
I'm
a
quivering.
good old
quiver.
Yeah.
11 days after going missing from the SS Dresden, a body was discovered floating near the mouth of a Dutch river going out to the North Sea. It was badly decomposed, but the sailors took 4 items off the body: a coin purse, an eyeglass case, a penknife, and an enamel pillbox. When they made port, they turned the items over, and with Rudolf Diesel's name all over the news, like having disappeared in nearby waters, everyone's like, ooh, is this his? Maybe let's call his son. And Rudolf Diesel Jr. confirmed that the items belonged to his father.
So they didn't like save the body or anything.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
There's questions around that. These days we, can do testing on that and find out better information about some things. But at that time, it's like if you couldn't recognize somebody's face, then yeah.
They could sometimes do dental records if they had them.
Mm-hmm. In Munich, Marta opened up the case that Rudolf had given her and found 20,000 German marks, as well as a bunch of documents to show how not great their financial situation was. Bum, bum, bum. There was no official investigation into Rudolf Diesel's death. He disappeared in international waters, and there was no legal jurisdiction for any one country. And since the body was released back into the sea, there's no body and no coroner's report. But I don't even think there was even an official full-blown investigation into it. It was ultimately ruled a suicide. World War I began the following year on July 28th, 1914, and everyone got distracted by that. As you heard in that series of news headlines from the New York Times, as things got increasingly more wild with these headlines and what might have been happening, that didn't stop the public and the generally questionable levels of journalism at the time period in the early 20th century to put forth their own conspiracy theories for murder, with a couple of big names at the center. Germany's emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and the richest man in the world, John D. Rockefeller. Also like the owner of Standard Oil, which oil. It's important to note that yes, Rudolf Diesel's death is mysterious because we don't know for certain what happened. There's no investigation, no arrests, no letters to say what his plans were, no body, nothing. So we can't really say it was officially this, although history will generally just say it was a suicide. The following conspiracies are just that. They're conspiracy theories. So I just want to say this is fun, and this is why these names get brought up into his story, but a lot of holes have been poked into all these theories. Okay. Why Kaiser Wilhelm II? So as I mentioned a moment ago, World War I is already looming. It didn't just start with that was like the proverbial straw of many proverbial straws on the proverbial camel's back. This was a powder keg just waiting to blow. And the match was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. I hate that immediately Franz Ferdinand, Take Me Out plays in my head the moment.
It does for all of us, honestly. I'm not sure there's a human that can escape that, but
Take me out. That's it. That's the only thing that it's just those words, and then it just stops, and then I can move on with what happens in my life. but they took him out, and that was the match. It happened. For the years and years, leading up to June 28th, 1914, at the break of World War I, Britain and Germany were having their own, amongst the many other things that are going on, Britain and Germany are having their own arms race with each other. Britain had a mighty navy for centuries, for a long time up to this. And then Germany, Prussia, all the way up until the point where we had the Franco-Prussian War, in which they became Germany with that. Up to that time, Germany and then Prussia, they were considered a major military power and had one of the largest or more powerful armies, as I understand it. So to be steam powered for so long and then have the power of diesel, which allows for less resources, able to go for longer without refueling, and the most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, no smokestacks that billow out plumes of thick smoke and give away your position on the water, that would all be rad as fuck. Hell yeah, give me that sweet, sweet diesel technology, baby. And don't let my enemies have it, right? Because I want all of that diesel tech for myself. The reason why the Kaiser is thrown in there as the name behind a murder of Rudolf Diesel, an assassination, is the reasoning being that Rudolf is making deals with Winston Churchill, who at this time, I know we associate his name with like World War II, right? At this time, he was the first Lord of the Admiralty, and he was in charge of all the Navy stuff. So there are deals going on with Winston Churchill and Rudolf Diesel. And Kaiser Wilhelm II is like, oh, hell no, I don't like this at all. Rumor on the street being that they were making deals to have an exclusive patent for diesel engines to be crafted for British battleships, which would have blown their current big boy ships, the Dreadnought, out of the water. No pun intended. I wrote that in. And really, having diesel power and not having the poof, poof, poof of smoke would have really been one of Britain's only helps, or main helps at least, against what Germany went all in on. And that was their U-boat.
I knew that's what was coming. I was like, it's coming.
Here it is. They want diesel power for their U-boats, but also like they're under the water. No one's able to see them so well. So if Britain can be a little more stealthy and at least not have plumes of smoke and have diesel efficiency engines, like that's really going to help them out in the water war. Now, why John D. Rockefeller? Standard Oil was having a bit of a crisis in their money in the early 20th century. So he was the richest man in the world and still ends up on a lot of like history's richest people lists. He was a real dick. I'll say that much. He's probably not one of my favorite people in history at all. He gets on my shit list for sure.
Kindness was not a pillar. What would you say? It was not a pillar character. Yeah. Like it was not big on his list of things he found important.
No, fuck this guy. So business wise, he had a monopoly. I mean, across oil and fuel and stuff like that. I mean, and also vertical monopolies too. So he owned all the parts of the operation, the mines, the wells, the refinery, the packaging, the sending, like all of it. And on top of it, he also owned fake companies for oil that still used his mines and vertical operations. So he's got fake companies that are buying his oil. And I don't know how the business stuff of all that works, but it was monopolies, man.
Yeah, he owned every aspect and every inch of that industry.
And his business practices weren't great. And that's an understatement. One story that is very popular is that the Asian market, for centuries, Asian countries had been using nut and vegetable oils to light their lamps. But he flooded the Asian market, with cheap kerosene, and even gave away free kerosene lamps so that the nut and vegetable oil sales plummeted. So he cut in, flooded the market, made it really cheap, gave people the lamps, no more nut and vegetable oil sales, and then jacked the price up when that's the only thing that they can use. He also employed the Pinkertons. Boo, Pinkertons. They suck. And They were just like a really violent, like I kind of want to say like detective, but they were basically like, yeah, they were like an undercover kind of sort of policey,
The dark
like,
web of security.
Yeah, sort of. And he just union busted all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's all kinds of problems with that. Anyway, Standard Oil was dissolved in 1911 by the Supreme Court under antitrust laws, which then broke up into other things like Chevron, which was based in one part, and Exxon, which is based in another part, and Mobil, based out of another part of the United States. And they're all still like pieces of the same company at that time. One of the last letters that Rudolf Diesel wrote to Marta, you know how I said he like bookended these letters of like, here's some things that are going on in my life and what's going to happen when I get over to England to talk about this deal. And, and then there's that really sweet love letter in the middle. You must know how I love you, like a quivering. Okay. Well, one of the things he wrote about to Marta was his frustration with the now split oil trust trying to create headwind for one of his companions, his travel companions on the Dresden. One of the two guys that he was with had a diesel plant company, and business was going slow for them because these oil trust companies, now that they're all broken up, they're like just trying to dig their heels in and not allow for efficiency with like the testing, all this stuff, because it was found that the diesel engine could also run just fine on crude oil that was coming out of Mexico, which was yet another threat to the U.S. oil trusts. So as diesel is expanding, these plants are expanding, oil is digging in its heels, trying to do whatever it can to slow down these diesel sales, or at least like to slow down like the crude oil threat on them too. It's also found that diesel engines could also run on all kinds of other fuels, including nut and vegetable oils. And diesel really loved the idea of peanut oil to be used as a fuel, thereby allowing more countries in the world access to create their own fuel instead of having to rely on foreign petroleum. So basically he was saying like these Asian markets, I know, I really do like him.
He freed the world from the monopoly of oil, basically, is what he did.
Yeah.
Or what he tried to do.
What he tried to do, yes.
He tried to do, yeah.
That's absolutely right. He wanted people to be of like all different classes and all different industries to be able to access his engine, and for whatever reasons they needed to make farming more efficient in more rural areas, to bring power back to these artisan classes, to keep people from not flooding into these cities and, not kind of centralizing people too much and just allowing people of all classes to have power, not these industry barons. And industry barons don't like that. So that's the reason why people are like, it could have been John D. Rockefeller. There's a lot of holes in that one. And I'll have my article linked to like the reasons why there's some holes in that one. A lot of the reasoning that's given forth by the author of the book that I read, Douglas Brunt, he's talking about like the electric vehicle at that time, and that there's some stuff going on between Rockefeller and Edison and an electric vehicle. But his whole was like, he's like, really wasn't a big deal at the time. It really wouldn't have been as disruptive as maybe electric vehicle is today. Like, how that really,
right.
It's like, that wasn't the same. It wasn't electrical vehicles were going to be a big deal. He had a few holes in that. I'll link to if you want to know a little bit more about that. But essentially what I'm saying is there's some holes in all of these different conspiracies. Although, I mean, they have good reason to, like, the motive is there. Yeah,
the motive is definitely there.
And then one I think that gets put forth by the author quite a bit, which is not really talked about in any other articles, but it was he even on the boat at all? Was it even his body?
I was going to ask you, is it even his body? Because it was so badly decomposed. I'm like, how do you know? Like, what if he just scarpered?
It could have. I don't know. So what then happens is
but didn't everybody see him on the boat? Like, they interacted with him?
So here's the thing. Yes.
Oh, my.
Oh, yeah. Oh, girl, I'm getting in there.
So here we go.
He's on board with these two friends. I forgot their names because I'm brilliant like that. Friend 1 and friend 2. One of the friends owns this new diesel plant. That's neither here nor there at the moment, but he's got these two friends that he's going to be traveling to England with, all 3 friends on the ship. Yay. When his 2 friends realize that he wasn't at breakfast the next morning, they're like, whoa, let's go get him from his room. Not responding. They get his room opened up. Where is he? Oh my goodness, where could he be? They walk around trying to find him. They find his hat and his coat laid neatly on the promenade deck, just like, and just put on the side. What could have happened to him? They had identical stories that never changed over the whole rest of the time. Their stories never changed. This is what happened. This is when we saw him. This is when he went to bed and he said he was going to see us the next morning. He was in good spirits. There. However, because of who he is, I would imagine, technically the most famous person on this overnight ferry
Probably.
from Belgium to London.
Yeah.
And no one else could verify that they saw him. He's on the list. He's on the guest list or whatever, like people who should have been on the ship.
Yeah.
But there's this sailor that then comes forth, one of the crew members, and says, I saw him. I talked to him. He found out that the ship wasn't going to be leaving for a little while yet, so he didn't want to board yet. He's like, I'll go wait, drops off his bags, and he goes and hangs out for a little bit. You know how kind of like how you might be like, oh, here's my bags. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee while I wait for the ship. I don't want to just be sitting on the ship. Yeah, right. And he never saw him again.
Interesting. So did he even miss the...
Yeah. So, and he said, and also, if you look at the steward's records, you're going to find that he never checked into his room. Like he's on our passenger list, but he never actually like checked in. And then you go like, well, other people would have seen him on the ship, right? The captain didn't come forward to say that he had saw him. Other crew members didn't come forward to say that they had seen him. They're like, and he's not signed in. His friends though were like, oh no, he was on the boat. Like he ate with us. Now you think that you might have somebody in the kitchen that's like, oh yeah, no, I served 3 men at the table.
Yeah. And nobody could verify that?
So that's another weird thing added in. I know. Like he should have been on the ship, but then we have just, and it's not like, again, a lot of people can say, oh yeah, no, he wasn't on the ship. He wasn't. But there's one adamant crew member who's also, his story never changed. He's like, I talked to him. He was gonna go and wait until it was getting closer to boarding time.
Yeah.
And I personally didn't see him again. And if you look, he's not like signed in with the steward. And shouldn't he be signed in with the steward if he was on the ship and checked in?
Yeah. Well,
interesting. So what happened? We don't know. It's a mysterious death. The book by Douglas Brunt dives into his biography and then like spends some time talking about Kaiser Wilhelm's background as well as John D. Rockefeller and just kind of like what might have, again, given motive to these things, spent a lot of time in each of their stories, and then the conspiracies at the end. So if you want to dig into that a little bit more, it's there for you if you'd like. But
was his company like bankrupt?
They weren't doing great. Yeah. I mean, if you look later and find out that, yeah, they were losing some money. Like he had these financial documents that he gave to Marta to show that their finances weren't that great anymore.
Interesting.
He had been losing money.
Huh.
Yeah, it is. It's so weird. That's the thing. You just run into a lot of dead ends with it of like.
Yeah. Unless he planned his death and swore his friends to secrecy. And they planted those items on a body.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd have to, because they were identified as his. But he would have had to have been in on it if it was not him.
Mm-hmm.
If that body was not him. Or maybe it was him the whole time.
Right. Exactly. We don't know. Some people were like, well, he must have just gone for a walk and fallen in. And like, why would he take off his hat and his coat? So that
and fold them neatly.
Fold them. And then like, what, just happened to fall in? What if he was pushed?
That was...
Oh, he could have been pushed. He could have done it himself. And, so there's that. And then you have people that are like, murder? And then people poke some holes through that one as well, too. Although both men, if they really wanted to, they're both powerful and rich enough.
Yeah.
If they wanted something like that, sure. I suppose they could. There's some holes in those theories, too. And then there's holes in the theory of, was he even on the boat at all? Like, no one could really corroborate any of that stuff either. Corroborate. Roger Rabbit.
Wow. Mystery history.
Mystery history, everybody. Rudolf Diesel. I know that doesn't sound very sexy. I was like, oh man, Diesel. Like, I don't know anything about engines and like engineering and machinery and stuff like that. But the story sounded so interesting. Again, when you're adding in names like Kaiser Wilhelm II and John D. Rockefeller and these big monopolies and trusts and very powerful people. It's always like, well, what happened?
Yeah, always.
So I was intrigued, but
plus it's something that affects our daily lives today. It's what runs the school buses and any big heavy piece of machinery. So,
and that's the thing too that the author talks about is just like someone who so incredibly revolutionized industry with this diesel.
We still use his technology now.
And people
we
don't
rely
know
on it.
Right. Yeah. People don't know his name like they do Nikola Tesla or Henry Ford.
He didn't sell it to just one person. He was selling it off to the world, and then made it usable by all with multiple fuel sources, So you're talking two like apples and oranges right now.
Right. I mean, totally a man of the people who's like, I want my inventions to actually help all kinds of people. Not he's like, yeah, and yes, he got rich. I mean, for a time he got rich doing it, but he wasn't John D. Rockefeller. And he was gifted with that brain for sure. He knew exactly how to think of things and use them and how he wanted them to be used in the world. So the diesel engine and the creators, very mysterious death.
Good old Rudolph.
Oh, Katie. Good old Rudolph. Yeah, what a cool guy. I know just in the prologue of the book, I was like, oh, I'm going to like Rudolf Diesel. I like him. He seems like a generally likable person. Or at least, when it comes to all these sort of second industrial revolution, early 20th century industry stories, So he was good. But thank you, Katie, for real life Excalibur as well. Oh my goodness. Sword in the Stone. I would love to know more of like what happens with that over time.
Me too. I'm hoping they come out with like more like testing, how they carbon date stuff and stuff like that. I would love to get like a more exact. Maybe we're hoping for things that aren't going to happen. I shouldn't get ahead of myself. You're not going to find out that this belonged to this king of wherever and blah, blah, blah. Probably not. It could be just like, a cavalry sword that got dropped in the wind and then sediment just formed around it. But still, it's still cool to think of. It's still kind of magical. Still captures the imagination, especially with stories like Sword in the Stone and everything. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Swords. I mean, swords are just fun, right?
I mean, we would all pick them up and wave them around if we could. So, yeah.
Why not? Yes, absolutely. Well,
you're going to grab it and you're going to chop something like a watermelon in half. We all have the urge. It's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Stabbing water bottles. You're like, yeah.
Well, thank you, Katie, for bringing your history to the Smoke Circle today. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us in said Smoke Circle to talk about swords and stones. Ching, 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 ching. Look forward to hearing how more of that news comes out. And then, get in your little diesel-powered vehicle of sorts and go poop, 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 poop across Europe with it. I don't know.
Yeah, most Volkswagens are diesel. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. There it is.
Bringing fuel efficiency to a whole new level.
The diesel engine. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for coming over. And if you miss us, make sure that you're following us over on Instagram or on TikTok. Or hey, be a Patreon friend and find us over there. All of our Patreon and our social media is all linked in our show notes here. And just follow us over there. Just say hi. We like people coming in and saying hi and love that episode. Thanks. Thank you so much. We love you. Anyway, I'm going to go. I hope you guys have a wonderful couple of weeks ahead of you. Katie, I hope you do as well. In the meantime, get money, get high, give love, and
man, support your local diesel engine. Like, let's be honest. Like, buy diesel, everybody. Or find swords and stones. But if one were to find a sword discarded somewhere, first responsibly ascertain that it's not a historically important sort of thing. So maybe don't touch it right away. But if, you can safely have that sword, don't cut anything important off with it. Make sure you're only stabbing water bottles and watermelons. Safety first. I was like, a lot of good, but also questionable advice.
Questionable, but you know what? I mean, should you ever really follow our advice? I don't know. Except be here in 2 weeks. That's our advice for you. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.